Hello, I am Jon O'Brien from the Keystone Contractors Association. And if you've been following along the past couple years, you'll know that in 2018, KCA started the Construction Opioid Awareness Week. And every year we try and increase our resources and increase our help to the industry. And this year we have something awesome, something really great here. Chris Lalevee from Operating Engineers Local 825 is going to provide just a general overview. It's a return to basics. For 8 years we've been at it. So he's just going to give a big picture. Where are we? Where are we going? What more can the industry do? So, I mean, Chris has positioned himself as kind of an industry expert across the country. And I'm super excited to have him on. Hey, Chris, what's going on today?
John, what's going on, buddy? How you been?
Not much. I'm just excited for this discussion, and checking in with you is always fun. So great to
Yeah, it
hear you're
is. It's
doing
always
good.
always a good time. Always a good time. I would
Yes.
talk a little baseball, but the Pirates are looking a little rough right now.
Yeah, let's just
So,
bypass baseball talk.
all right, no problem.
Yes.
No, I'm happy to be part of your Opioid Awareness Week 2025. Always happy to discuss, although it's not the easiest topic to discuss and probably not the sexiest topic to discuss, but it is still a topic that's very much in the forefront that needs to be discussed. And we did get some good news recently from the CDC that drug overdose deaths dropped by 27%. So that was really good news.
That's
And
awesome.
that's around, yeah, right. So that's around 80,000 deaths in 24, and that's compared to somewhere between 110 and 120 in 2023. That overall number is important, but it's very important to understand that it's an overall number. There are states and with, cities that did see it spike higher. But overall, when we look at overall America, it did drop, and that's a great thing.
Yep.
Uh, we've been doing more. It did start with President Biden and is, still going with President Trump to where we're working on, seizing fentanyl and
Hmm.
things of that nature. The problem that we see a little bit is when we see the numbers go down in the east, the numbers go up in the west, and vice versa. So maybe a little bit more attention or people on that might help that out a little bit more. I don't know the answer to that, but it's something. We also have, new players in the game, which is scary. We have another synthetic called xylazine. And xylazine is a veterinary drug, and that's used for sedation, muscle relaxing, and pain relief in animals. And the street name for that is trank dope. And xylazine is a little bit different.
Hmm.
Um, it does do a lot of the same things as fentanyl, but the added problems of xylazine is it starts to eat at your flesh from the inside out.
Oh, geez.
And yeah, so it's a real rough mixer. And just like fentanyl, odorless, very hard to detect. There are tests with naloxone of how it works against xylazine. And, there are right now there's test strips to find out if there's xylazine in what you may be using. Um, and it seems the overall understanding is whether it's fentanyl, xylazine, whatever, use the naloxone. It's
Hmm.
better than nothing.
Yep.
So that's one thing. Um, in 2019, we saw it a little bit, and it started to spike up what's called nitazene. And nitazene is another synthetic. And the thing with nitazene was it was never approved for medical use. And it gets sourced from out of the country, being mixed with, drugs, other drugs just like fentanyl and
Yeah.
xylazine. The scary thing is that it's 30 to 40% more potent than fentanyl.
Geez.
So, you're looking at a higher concentration. They're using it and it's keeping the cost of the drug producing on the production side of the street drugs, it's keeping that down. Um, the DEA, if you followed nitazene, if you looked at its overall, it was first identified, like I said, 2019 in the Midwest. Then it started moving to the southern states, and then most recently over here by me along the eastern seaboard. Um, Again, very potent, being mixed into other drugs, and it's a lot cheaper. It's even cheaper than fentanyl.
Gee,
So, that's the scary part. So what are we
yeah,
going to start seeing from that? It is an opioid which attaches to opioid receptors. So, naloxone is a good way to combat it. Whether you would need more is, you know, up for discussion, but opioid is an opioid. You know, we see so much with pills and powders, and that's what we hear with the mixers of xylazine and nitazene and fentanyl. um, but we're starting to see marijuana laced with fentanyl,
mm,
marijuana faced with nitazene and xylazine, all off the street. I know that some states have legalized the marijuana, but it's starting to get a lot of that. The other thing we're seeing is fentanyl laced vapes, and that's kind of scary too.
yeah,
There's a something that's over the counter. Vaping's very easy to conceal in our business. It's almost like smoking a cigarette, so you wouldn't think
yep,
twice about somebody vaping really. Um, the dosages are very unpredictable. There's no quality control in what's going in that. With the vaping, it's a very rapid absorption because it is a water vapor. So that's a rapid absorption that gets into the body quicker.
hmm,
Um, and again, odorless and tasteless. So you wouldn't know if that's what somebody was doing or not.
scary. Oh, man.
It is,
Yeah,
and it's important to know that it's out there. And I say it all the time. People in addiction, active addiction, they're not using because they want to get high. When they're in an active addiction, they're using because they're trying to stay alive. Their body is so reliant on it now that they're using it to stay alive. So you figure if you have it in the form of a vape and you can take a little hit of it here and a little hit of it there, and that gets you through the day, you know, when you really look at it, that's what's going on.
huh,
They're not trying to get through the day high, you know. And
yeah,
some important things to know, even when we look at going to the doctor and we look at pain relief. There's over 100 different kinds of opioid prescriptions that are out there. You have
mhm,
Vicodin, Oxycontin, Percocet, codeine, fentanyl. Fentanyl is very much in it within the drugs. It's just mixed correctly. Methadone and those things that are all out there. It's important to remember that construction is the number one in overdose,
yeah,
greater than any other industry.
crazy.
You know,
Yeah,
um, so that all that stuff is there, but again, mixed correctly in labs by the correct people. So when we look at construction and we look at your average construction worker through the years and the bangs and the bumps and the backaches and everything else, you have to take into account that the two leading causes of addiction are surgery and workplace injury.
yeah,
And it's very, very real. So even if you're under um, care of a doctor and taking opioids, what I tell people is, I wake up a lot in the middle of the night, whether that's to use the bathroom, get a drink of water, whatever that might be. If you are on a prescription painkiller that has, let's say, fentanyl mixed in, which opioids do, let's say it's 3:30 in the morning and you had knee surgery and you woke up because you're using the bathroom and your knee is throbbing and you say, you know what, let me take one of these pills, get myself some sleep.
hmm,
Now, as construction workers, we're getting up at 4 or 5 in the morning. You don't necessarily remember you took that pill.
yeah, huh,
And now when you say, oh, I got to take my morning pill, you've now elevated the amount of fentanyl that's in your body, which will enact the breathing stopping and things of that nature, then put you in crisis. So it's not all addicts. People have a you know a stigma way of how an addict looks and
Yep.
that kind of thing. But it's not all addicts, and it's not all people with drug problems. It's people that just genuinely made a mistake. Uh, you know, like I just said there, took a med at 3 in the morning and took it again because they totally forgot.
Yep. Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the more you see opioids prescribed to the senior citizen community, you start to see naloxone prescribed with it.
Huh.
I've received a lot of phone calls from people with, elderly parents, and they'll say to me, "Hey, that stuff that you talk about, naloxone, my mother got this, and they gave us this." And I'll give them a quick rundown over, and I have that same conversation. Um, and it makes sense, but it's a matter of living and dying. So, knowing how to use it is important. And I'm a huge advocate for naloxone. I mean,
Yep. Same here. Yep.
yeah, I
Every
think it
job.
should
We
be.
want it on every job site. Yes,
That's
absolutely.
it. That's
Yeah.
it. We want it everywhere, and
Yep.
it's important.
Hmm.
It's important. It's as important to the addict who needs another second chance at life as it is to the person who made a mistake and
Yeah.
uh, doubled up on the medication by mistake.
And
You
and
know,
speaking of that, if I could, speaking of that, is that a major reason for the drop in deaths overdoses?
I don't know, but it's a good question.
Yeah.
It's more of the 24 statistics came out, and we're doing a little celebrating.
Yep.
Not a lot because it's still 80,000 people, but
Yeah.
we're still, that's a big number. Moving the needle 30,000 is a big number.
Yep.
So, naloxone is more accessible. I think some of the stigma's starting to come away from it. I know you've been doing a lot with KCA, getting it out on the sites. We've been doing it a lot in Jersey and, just across the nation. There's people, names I could bring up, Cal Byer, John Gall,
Yep.
guys that are out there, in Missouri, Washington State, they're getting the stuff out there. They're explaining it to people, letting them know this is not an enabler for an addict.
Yeah.
This is about saving lives. And when I talk about naloxone, um, anybody that doesn't know what I'm speaking about, it's the word Narcan, which most people know, but
Yep.
the additive in that Narcan is naloxone. That's what it is. And interestingly enough, when we look at fentanyl and when fentanyl was introduced, it was made in 1959. It was made in 1959
Huh.
as an anesthetic, and then it was approved in 1960. 10 years later, naloxone came along, and naloxone is not a drug, um, other than its only purpose is to knock opioids off the opioid receptors within your body.
Huh.
That's the
Okay.
only reason that it was developed. And, I've never read too much deeper into that, but I can just assume that if somebody was given too much fentanyl on an operating table, they need a way to bring you back.
Yep.
So, one went hand in hand with the other. Um, I say the same as you, John. It's very accessible, should be kept on job sites, site trucks, everywhere. There is no harm in using it if somebody's not in an opioid crisis. So if it was a heart attack or anything else, that's very, very important. Um, I'm a big advocate of having it in your house. In your house, if you have someone on prescription pain meds, if you have someone elderly living with you, and especially if you have the teens to the young 20s.
Yeah.
Uh, the leading cause of overdose in the youth is unsecure medications. And, I was unstoppable and unbreakable at, 16, 17,
We all
18
are.
also.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yep.
I used to tell my father I'm the smartest 16-year-old he's ever met. So,
Yeah.
and now I use that with my son.
Yeah.
But just, to touch on that kind of stuff, I know you guys are a supporter of the ANSW,
Yep.
which
We
is
are.
the Alliance of Naloxone Safety in the Workplace. And our website's answ.org. So if you have any questions about naloxone or looking for workplace policy, things like that. It's all free. It's all there.
Awesome.
And
We'll give it
John
out.
always has my information. And if somebody wanted to talk more, I'm more than happy. I can go on about it, as you know.
I know, yeah, and I love it.
We've
I love
discussed
talking
a
about it.
lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. We've discussed a lot, and you guys are doing some great work out there.
Yeah.
Um,
We got to do
just
more of that.
having the whole,
Yeah.
we do, and it's the difference between doing the work or checking the box,
Yeah.
right? So checking the box is checking the box, but doing the work, it's different. And it's interesting when you meet somebody, and I have an operating engineer that I'm very friendly with. Uh, he's been in the union. He's a younger gentleman. He's been in the union for about 5 years. And he shared with me that he was saved by naloxone 3 times in his younger
Oh,
days.
oh wow.
Um, Here he is, a good operator, a good person, helps me out with my peer program. He's ready to jump in if I have somebody with a serious drug problem. He's ready to talk to him.
Awesome.
So these are all people that are, yeah, they don't have the brightest past, but now they're advocates. And they're
Neat.
advocates for the younger generation, and to talk to them, and to get the point across.
That's awesome.
And you look at someone like that, and here he is, and he's gotten married, and his wife's pregnant, and just really good things which would have never happened if we just threw him away as an addict when he
Yep.
was younger, or he wasn't saved with naloxone. Um, and he works a 12-step program. He, you know, thanks his higher power every day. And you know what? He just goes to work every day, and he's a happy guy. And I think that's, there was a there was a statistic that came out not too long ago that over 40% of us know somebody that have struggled or are struggling with addiction, whether that
Yep.
be drug or alcohol. And that's a big number.
That is big.
And
Yeah.
and
It's everywhere.
I think it's a low number, you know. And when you think about it, you can get better.
Hmm.
It's listed as a curable disease, and that's the word in there, is curable.
Yep.
So, to take that stigma out, to help somebody, I do it a lot, as you know, to see somebody go into a treatment program. Some fall off and they go back in, and they get better. Sometimes it's 2 times, sometimes it's 3 times, sometimes it's 1 time. You don't know. But these are all people that are thriving. Um, you didn't have to go to a funeral for a son, for a husband,
Yeah.
for a dad. And that's really what gets to me. And then just the overall seeing them thrive, seeing people thrive.
Yeah.
Uh, that part of their life is done, and now they're living a different life. That's, to me, I can't. That's the biggest payment of what I do is,
Oh,
checking out
absolutely.
social media and
Yeah.
seeing, just seeing people like, wow,
Yeah. Going
they
to
just look
proms, doing
better.
this, high
Yeah,
school
they're
graduation, living their life.
pictures with their kids, and you're just like, wow, like this is happening, and it's good,
This
you
is good.
know.
Yep.
And me being a union guy, I'm a big advocate for, we talk union wise, and we talk, brother, sisterhood, and that kind of thing. And,
Yeah.
the best thing you can do is pick somebody up when they're at their worst. It's easy to jump on board when they're at their best,
Yeah.
but when they're at their worst, that's when people really need you. And that little bit of understanding and that little bit of help, goes a long way.
Agree.
And one interesting story I have for you is, I had I had a job, a decent sized job, and we got naloxone on the job. And there was a guy from one of the trades that kept asking about it. Why the naloxone? Why the naloxone? Um, so finally, the safety guy said to me, he's very curious about the naloxone. He doesn't say why. Uh, he goes, would you come do a talk on the naloxone? I
Hmm.
said, sure. So went up to the job, did a talk on the naloxone, went over everything, had a nice discussion with about 100 workers, all different crafts. And he was hanging out at the end. They had some coffee and donuts and things for the guys afterwards. And he came up to me. He said, "Hey, I, I'm a heroin addict."
Oh,
And I said, "Currently, or?" because some people
Yeah.
will consider themselves an addict
Always.
for life, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And he said, no, currently.
Hmm.
And I said, well, that's sad.
Yeah.
And he said, no, it just kind of makes me feel okay that there's naloxone on the job and I don't use during work. And I said to him, why use it all?
Yeah. Oh man.
And we had this like 1 minute staring contest, and he went, I don't know. I said, we got into talking, father of two, you know, the whole thing. And I said, don't your kids deserve you to be
Yeah.
around? You know, don't you deserve it? Aren't you good enough? And I can't afford to kick it. I said, what do you mean you can't afford to kick it?
Hmm.
Um, I said, you're a union so and so. We have good insurance. If one thing we talk about in the unions is we have great insurance. Um, Long story short, I looked into a program. His copay was $75. He went into a 28-day program, and he's on about 8 or 9 months right now, clean.
That's awesome.
And
Awesome.
here he is doing his thing.
Yeah.
His eyes aren't recessed anymore. He's looking healthier. He's back in the gym working out, and you just go look at that,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
And then he'll be at the
Now
graduation. He'll be at the high school graduation.
that's it, man.
He'll be at the
He'll
prom,
take
get your
pictures at the
picture.
proms and
Yeah.
all the good stuff that's supposed to be there for us,
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we look at this whole opioid and opioid crisis, it only takes 3 days for an opioid to grab you.
Yeah.
So it's very, very quick.
That's so
And
scary.
this, with us discussing it and just your overall understanding of it, people start selling their prescription opioids because they're worth money
Yep.
and they go to heroin. We all like a deal. So if one pill will get me 5, 6 hits of heroin, I'm getting a 5 to 1, and I have to feed my habit. Because like I said, I'm surviving. I'm not, getting high to go enjoy myself. Like this is a great thing,
Yeah. Yep.
but what's out there on the street, as you heard before, is very scary, and although we're
Nitazene.
combating
Oh
it,
my gosh, all these oh so much
yeah,
crazy stuff coming out. More, it seems like more and more is coming out all the time.
yeah. And I say, you go back to the Richard Nixon days to where, he had said, drugs are, that was a big catastrophe. What was going on with drugs? We had the war on drugs with Nancy Reagan.
Yep.
Will it ever go away? I doubt it. I
Yeah.
really doubt it. And it's sad, but for us to ignore it, it isn't humane either,
Yeah.
So, um, unfortunately, I've had people that passed and couldn't do it. They just
Yeah.
couldn't get through it. But I always look and think about that and say, at least I tried,
Yep.
you know?
And I
So
can say you do try. I mean, as far as we can't ignore it, you definitely don't ignore it. You take the fight on. You're doing a lot, and you're to be commended. Just
I
you know,
appreciate it.
yeah, you're awesome.
Yeah. It's, is when you lose people to overdose, it's real.
Yeah.
When you lose people to overdose and when you start to see, you get older and people that lose their kids, man, that's
Uh,
just a hard pill. No,
yeah.
no, no, no pun intended. That's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And they tried to do this and they tried to do that, but you know,
It's yeah.
so we try harder. We just
Yep.
try harder. That's all we could do.
Yep. Try harder, make sure it doesn't happen again, and just do
Yeah,
more. So
yeah. I
get
mean, if
get that
anybody could
80,000
fix,
deaths, get that lower next year. So we got to keep
yeah,
getting it lower and lower till it's to zero.
if anybody could fix something, it's this industry,
Yes,
right? So,
absolutely.
we can do it.
Yeah.
But no, I appreciate the time. I appreciate you getting this out. And honestly, if anybody, within your realm or whatever would like to talk more,
Yep.
I'm always open. You can give them my phone number, my email, whatever
Absolutely.
it is.
Okay. Yep. I'll get the ANSW out there again. We keep blasting that out and
Yep.
get your info out there. And always enjoy the conversation. It's awesome what you're doing. Keep up the great efforts. And we're
Thanks,
just
man. I
trying
love
to
what
do
you
a
got
little
you
bit of
doing.
what you do. I try to do a little bit of what you do. So I try and get there.
Hey, listen, If we all did a little bit, it
Yep.
would be a whole lot, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. For sure.
That's all we could ask for.
Yep. So everyone do a little bit. All right.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, John. Great seeing you, man.
You too.